Okay, Marina, good to see you this evening. Thank you for this discussion we're going to be discussing immigration reform policies, and particularly in reference to a debate case that homeschool debaters are running on changing U.S. Romania policy for the topic on U.S. European country policy, and it has to do with the Romanian visa waiver. So Radu Nikita, an economist in Cluj, Romania, discussed this in the First Look conference in September about how sort of crazy the status quo is and how it could be reformed. And that's part of a broader issue of making it easier for people to travel, for tourism, and even for work with labor mobility. But let's start with the Romanian tourist waiver program. You've looked at the case on this, and I've asked for your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. That was actually very interesting, and me as well. I experienced this because when I came here to Canada with just my Romanian passport, I really wanted to go and visit US, and I had an uncle there living in California, and I actually wanted to spend some time there, do some traveling, but I was not. I was aware of the fact that I do need a visa. And I knew that the process was not quite easy in the sense that I would need to go through an interview, the formal process. Meanwhile, all of my friends that were coming from Spain or other European countries, they didn't have any issue. They just had to apply for a really quick approval that was done instantly. So that was a bit of frustration there. And before getting my Canadian citizenship, basically, I kind of avoid to go and spend my money there in the United States and increase the traveling. You know, every bit counts, as I like to say. And also have the chance to participate and meet other people, exchange ideas. Who ideas actually can bring some added value to different persons in the pieces, and I avoided just because of the trouble of not going through the whole paperwork, through the whole formal process. But after 8 years of living here in Canada, finally I got it, and I had
You
the chance to
received you received your Canadian
I
visa
received my
or
Canadian passport.
citizenship, which
Yeah,
means you now, yeah.
and
So yeah.
yeah.
So as a Romanian, you're sort of a second-class citizen in the sense that even though Romania is part of the European Union and part of NATO, so Romanian troops are fighting, you're stationed with Americans in Afghanistan, Iraq, or various places they've been, but they can't visit the U.S. without going through this separate process of an in-person visit with the embassy to apply. So how do you plan a vacation or a trip if you don't know if you're going to be approved or not? And I understand that you can be approved and then you show up in the US and all of a sudden they decline it for some other reason.
Yeah, that is true. This was actually pretty stressful for me. Even if I got my when I got my Canadian passport, I remember asking my aunt and uncle, "Hey, listen, I still need to apply for an interview. I still had the Romanian the mentality that I have the citizenship, my Romanian passport, and I can't travel." And they say, "No, now with the Canadian, you don't even need to apply for the small amount of $7 that is done instantly just to travel along with your passport. You can just move freely." And I was thinking, what changed in my status? I'm the same person with the same criminal background, with the same ideas, with the same values. And from one day to another, I could just travel just because I was holding another citizenship and another passport. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's not only with US, and I know that would be, and that's the main goal, but that happened as well back in Spain when we were actually joined the European Union, but we are not allowed actually to work for 2 years. Both Romania and Bulgaria, we had a transitional period where we're
Right.
not allowed to. So yeah, kind of the same feeling, pretty frustration, and but yeah, now apparently I can just move freely
Yeah.
there.
So for the students, they could run a case saying we're going to abolish the restriction on, the rationale from the government is that Romanians who apply to visit the US are turned down in a tiny, somewhat higher percentage than is the, whatever standard in the system. But in any case, people ought to be able to travel. And what are we concerned? We're concerned about terrorists, criminals, people with infectious diseases. That's all a process that's certified. But the fact that someone's Romanian, Bulgarian for somewhere else, why should they be treated differently? So this would be improving travel between the U.S. and Romania. And related to that, after World War II, there was an effort to help young people in Germany learn about Western ideals and transition from the fascist ideas they were raised with. So there were huge numbers of Germans allowed in the U.S. as young people, as students to work. And that was a transition process. Well, similarly, when the fall of communism, Romanians had lived under communism for 50 years. And the idea that they could get to the West or get to the US and see the world. But of course, we restricted that. And so it's gradually lessened as Romania joined NATO and the EU, but there's still vestiges of that. I comment to students, if we had had far more Ukrainians and Russians visit the US over the last 50 years since the fall of communism, not 50 years, but 30 years since the fall of communism, that would have helped Ukrainians be wealthier, Russians be less Russian-ish or whatever. It would allow this mixing of cultures. It would be beneficial for us and for them.
I do agree. And especially as you mentioned, work mobility wise, sometimes, let's put an example, we're very famous, and not saying that in United States you can't find people like that, not at all. But Romanians are very famous to work in IT and very good at. So how not maybe an American company can benefit from a student who is interested to learn more and develop and bring new ideas coming from Romania, just because it's Romania, right? And just to piggyback a little bit of what you said with the West, and that we're not allowed before the fall of the communists to travel to the West countries, was the reason was not to go there, as you mentioned, and see that it's the freedom, the mobility, the rights, civil rights, and everybody had that chance. We were not allowed to because they were afraid that we're coming with idea and will provoke a revolution, which in the end happened, right? But yeah, that was the main scope behind it.
Yeah, and I think it's and as I recall too, your first you go with your uncle and aunt to visit them in Spain. So you spend a week outside of Romania and Spain, and then you apply for a student graduate program in Spain. But you wanted to go there first. You could have applied for those things without ever being in the country, but going there, you learn something about it. Similarly, people coming to the U.S. on tourism, they may decide they want to apply to college or apply for a job or some other thing, but traveling is a step toward that. It might just be a vacation, but it also is a transition. And I think economists make the case that, Romanians who come here and work, they get skills, they get connections. A lot of times they go back and they start companies back there. So there's a lot of successful big Romanian companies that are started by some person who worked for Silicon Valley, 10 years ago and decided to start up in Romania. And it's the same with other countries around the world. The migrants go back and forth, connections and jobs. And, even people concerned about outsourcing and having Europeans, take our jobs. In fact, the U.S. companies that are outsourcing part of their work to India or people from Eastern Europe, they're actually hiring more Americans. It helps them because these people complement, they have different skills, and you hire more Americans at higher pay, often when you have more immigrants that are helping build your company. Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I experienced here as well. So yeah, I understand the point.
Yep. So that was the first question to ask. Also, I mentioned that Radu Nikita had forwarded to me a Facebook link or a social media link by somebody who was maybe not Russian, but pro-Russian, and it was an anti-American viral thing to Romanians saying, look how the Americans are treating you, right? That you fight in their wars and you can't even visit without, bowing down to immigration authorities, and they don't treat other Europeans like that. So this is a way to, this is what the Russians are trying to do, is be anti-West, to Romanians, Bulgarians, Ukrainians, wanting them to be, who are their friends? Well, you could probably travel to Russia more easily than you can travel to the U.S. And that for people on the margin, they can be influenced by this version of anti-American ideas.
And there's some interest for sure. That's for sure. We don't know which one are, and I prefer not to comment on this, not to be misinterpreted. But yeah, definitely there's some economic interests.
Yeah, and then the third side of that really is just the idea of freedom. Why should people should be treated differently? We're in favor of equality. We don't want injustice. And then we say a young person, young people like to travel. And all of a sudden, you can't come to the U.S. Why? Well, because you're Romanian. Well, yeah, but I'm a person like anybody else. I have a EU. Is there an EU passport, or what is an EU document? Or
we just have our passport, but we can travel everywhere. And between European Union, we can actually travel with our identity card. We don't even need a passport.
Okay, across all the members of the EU. Isn't there something different called Shenzhen, the Shenzhen area?
Yeah, that's why we're not part of it, and that's the reason United States was still asking, and it's still asking for a visa. Yeah. And this brings me a little bit, and just in a small comment here, that my sister, and her boyfriend, when they came here, we really wanted to do a trip, to take a trip to New York, and I was stopped again of the fact that I didn't have any passport, and now I said, hey, maybe we can look into further and explore a nice trip for a week, the three of us together. And of course, Antonio said, yeah, he's Spanish. And it's like, I don't have any issue. I can just apply. And I have my Canadian passport. Now my sister, she has to apply and go through all the immigration process. So how unfair is that, right? Just the three of us to try to connect in a place that we heard it's amazing. Yeah. So,
and to be tourists. I mean, again, yeah. So debaters, students could call for reforming that as a symbol of better policy, is also the reality of removing this barrier. And people have often commented that they sort of joke about the French and the Germans are say negative things about the Americans. The Germans believe it's this cowboy capitalism in the US, and the French are always the complaints. But the former communist countries are less socialist, right? They've lived under socialism. They are more pro-freedom, more pro-America, and yet we treat them very differently than we do the Western Europeans. So it's often called the New Europe. Vibrant and growing and so forth. And anyway, so that's more of that story. And so I've talked about that, sort of the sense students could just say it's a justice issue. And of course, for the Romanians that are in homeschool debate, that's a case they could run. Their relatives can't come and visit without some sort of government permit. Yeah. And other arguments, you learn about the world by traveling. And I was going to say that, you grew up under communism when you were little, under communism in Romania. Maybe you could give a sense of how you saw the world. I mean, your window to the world was your aunt and uncle that had left during communist times, because they'd been out there firsthand and could tell you in letters or over the phone.
Yeah, to be honest, I love this story, and I might get a bit emotional here, but it's true. I was actually just 4 years when the communists fell, but I will never, ever forget when my sister and I, it was Christmas time, and my grandparents, we were staying in a lineup with my grandparents to get 2 pieces of chocolate, and there were 10 persons in a line, and each of us will get 2, right? And just the chocolate just stopped at us. We got it, and there were 2 other persons in the back, and they literally start crying because they didn't have a small gift to give during Christmas time to their kids. And I remember that my grandpa looked at us and he said, well, you guys are twins, you can just split a chocolate, right? So I'm still having get a bit emotional, sorry. Yeah. But that's what I experienced, and it never deleted my mind. And then we obviously split. And but I do remember my my aunt and uncle and their story when they left Romania. My aunt's dad actually left Romania when the death penalty wasn't abolished, and they didn't have anything to eat. So he actually crossed the Danube when, if he would have sinned, he would have been killed. He managed to cross Italy, and he was caught and did some prison for 3 years there. And then he managed to get to Canada. But they literally didn't have anything to eat. I didn't. We were fortunate enough not to experience that. But knowing that you can die in each moment, and the death penalty is not abolished, and just try your luck. Wow, that for me it's cherishable. So, and all of the stories that my parents were telling me, that you didn't have the right to expression, we weren't able to see even the cartoons. My parents had to kind of try to um, get into a Bulgarian cartoon so that we can actually watch for 2 hours. There was nothing at the TV, and everything was broadcast was from 8 to 10. I will never forget just the regime, what they done, how beautiful things they done for people. And then no right to religion, no right to travel, because of course they were afraid we'll see the West and we'll come back, right? And then for Romania, I would say corruption, what determined me to leave and decide to leave Romania. And I would like to say forever, um, unless I'm actually, obliged to go there back. But that was something that was something that triggered. But then you have other people who are saying, during communism was very nice because everybody was equal. Romania did not have any external doubt towards other country. Everybody had a house, everybody has the same right, and the criminality rate was really low. So, that's what my grandparents are saying, and sometimes my grandparents were telling me.
Yeah.
So, I think a balance, right? I always say a balance, it's always the good path to go. But that's what I experienced during
Right.
my few years during
Right.
community.
But and the reality is, though, for Americans who might be listening, you couldn't get chocolate. And as special dispensation, you maybe could get a piece of chocolate standing in a line. But that was the reality you grew up with. Another friend from Romania, she mentioned that her family had 3 kids. So their grandfather had to stand in line to get extra milk. And, he got a cold and died, so there's that side of it. I talked to my brother-in-law who works at Boeing, and one of his friends is from Romania and served in the Romanian army. And my brother-in-law, who was in Germany in the U.S. Army when he was young, he asked him what he did in the army, and this guy, guarding the border. And my brother-in-law is perplexed. Oh, you mean they're like people afraid? You're afraid of people invading Romania? No, he was guarding the border, preventing people from leaving. He was one of the guys with a gun ready to shoot people they caught trying to get over the wires or over the river. And this isn't in the 1800s. This is like 1980s before the fall. So it's a bizarre world where, and we still have the bit of it with Russia, trying to prevent people from leaving Russia who don't want to serve in the military and attacking Ukraine. So this awfulness of the World War II and the Cold War, we've still got part of this that we're trying to escape from.
Yeah. And, my uncle actually, and I learned something very interesting when I was back in Hawaii, and we talked for a long time. And I learned something that my mom never told me ever, that at that time, my uncle's family, my grandmother and my grandfather were trying to build from scratch everything. And instantly after the fall of communism, they managed to work hard and have a bit of extra money. And then this was seen so bad that one night the security came to their door, and they were questioning them what happened. So why do they have more money than others? So then my uncle that was what triggered my uncle, and he said, I can't believe it. Like, security just came at our door, knocking in the night, just asking us how we, because they didn't trust, right? So that's what triggered him to leave to Israel and then go to Canada, right? But
Interesting.
that's interesting stories that gives kind of goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, then there's another area of U.S. immigration travel policy that I think is relevant for students. I had mentioned I was invited to speak to the Hyatt Club at the University in Cluj. Radu Nikita invited me, and I just asked, they introduced me from Seattle, and I asked students how many had been to America, and three-quarters of the students raised their hand. And I'm like, how did they all get to America? Well, it turns out they were part of a work travel program that is beneficial. Students like it. But again, it's one of these restrictive liberty things that's sort of a mess because they generally had negative impressions of America. And the reason is this program that the special dispensation by the US government allows juniors in college to come to America, but the jobs are like making beds in hotels or working at amusement parks. And this is not, I mean, it's good work for people to do, but for a college junior who's just about to graduate, that's not really the ideal thing you do in the US. Instead, you'd be interning with Microsoft or some other tech company. But maybe you can tell me a little bit about the work travel program and some of the challenges with it.
Yeah, I love you asked me about that because I was actually on the verge doing that and coming with that type of program here back in Canada. At that time, and I don't think the condition changed, you were actually allowed, it's called work and travel, up until you're 35, or at that time was actually up until you're 30. So at that point, when I decided to come to Canada, in my mind was like, oh, might as well, I'll just come and work in a ski resort, how fun that would be. Travel mobility, I can learn more. It's an easy program, easy to apply, though there are lots of candidates, but it's not so difficult because this program is open to different areas in different countries and different areas of that country. Let's say Canada is not just Vancouver; it would be Calgary and some other
Yeah.
regions. So pretty neat options out there. But I do remember when my uncle stopped me and he said, "Don't do that because for a person who graduated and they're studying and they want to get the skills and learn and bring their ideas and exchange the ideas with, as you mentioned, just to put a name out there, Microsoft or whatever company, that's not ideal because honestly, after you finish this program where you're just and not to sound weird, but you're just, as you mentioned, ski resorts, which do not bring a lot of experience in your field, then you have to go back, right? Because that's how the program works. At that time, the program was allowed for 1 year. I think now they extended to 2 years. I might be wrong, so I hope this it's not
Yeah.
taken for granted.
Yeah.
But with that caveat and disclaimer, but that's how it works. You have to go back, and then you think, okay, I maybe graduated college. I have this experience. I would like to learn more and bring my ideas and get more from professionals out there and exchange perspectives from different cultures. But you don't actually have the chance because it's not allowing you. The program just allows you to work in different parts of the country and different areas. As you mentioned, ski resorts, hotels, but not in the managerial position that can bring you some added value. And
Yeah.
then you have to go back, right? So yeah, it's a double sword out there. And sometimes they promote this as an exchange also with the language, but yeah, it's not
Yeah.
quite my opinion there. But
So
yeah,
yeah, it's a benefit. People enjoy it. They get to I see pictures on Facebook of
yeah,
Romanians I know out of college. They're in Golden Gate Bridge or they're visiting this thing, but they're working in a hotel, full time, and then maybe they're working somewhere else to earn some money, and then their tourism, and that's fine. There's lots of people who would like to do that, but we've got a system say we're only going to let college juniors or college graduates do that, and the reason is they think there'll be less likely people staying illegally if their degree depends on them going back. And I think in the US, it's more restrictive, but you have to pay a big fee to the company who arranges all this. You get low wages and you could say, well, it's better than nothing. Well, sure, maybe it's better than nothing, but there's huge losses in not allowing more people to travel. And particularly maybe some of the low knowledge people who would be influenced by anti-Western propaganda. Maybe they don't have a college degree or good English skills, but working in a hotel would be a good for them because it's better than working in a hotel in Romania, let's say, higher pay and things like that. Anyway, so you want to promote travel and freedom would be the argument for reform. But anyway, well, I appreciate you talking about that program and the Romanian visa program. That gives us some background for students that are looking at, again, this is the STOA topic on U.S. European country policy, and you could remove some of these barriers that are still left over from the Cold War and areas of high levels of immigration restriction.
Yeah. And also, just the last question I wanted to add, I do see that the restriction of traveling, it's actually restriction of ideas and restriction of perspectives and vision, which in my opinion, and learnings, which in my opinion right now, learning and knowledge, it's really powerful. It's a gold mine. So restricting traveling equal to me restricting knowledge.
Yeah. And how do people learn about other countries? Well, they watch the movies, and America's a place of car chases and gunfights and superheroes, or they read the newspaper and it's one calamity after another. So being there in person is seeing the everyday life and seeing opportunities. You know, that here in the Seattle area, many of the nursing homes and elder care centers are run by Romanians. They have built up this niche in the economy here of running these companies, and it provides a service here as well as income. And all around the world, there are immigrants who mix in with the local economy. In Vancouver, where you are, I don't know how many Romanians or Eastern Europeans are there, but it's quite a few. Same in the
It's
Seattle
quite
area.
a few, especially a certain area in Vancouver, quite a few. And the communities are pretty big. They have their own church, they have their own cultural centers. So, yeah.
They do their Romanian dancing or Eastern European
I
dancing.
guess so. I guess
Yeah.
so. Do you know, I didn't have the privilege to go actually to to Romanian central, but I do know that they do exist. I do know that the churches exist where just Romanian get together.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, Marina, thank you very much for discussing these things, and we'll put this together to make it available to speech and debate students.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.